is about almost 25 years old now. I think that's as good of an earmarker as any for the beginning of modern computer security and modern computer crime, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. So the discipline of information security has matured a lot in those years, I believe. We have standards now. We have case law, woohoo. We have all sorts of technology and tools and an industry around it. In that time, though, the vulnerability space is remarkably similar in the sense that we're still dealing with holes in underlying protocols, dealing with configuration of both infrastructure and applications. And our end users and our administrators are still prone to being socially engineered. And of course, it's been 10 years of fighting SQL injection attacks and cross-site scripting, so some things seem to never change. There have been, however, some interesting developments in the attack space in the sense that malware, for example, is now just as likely to collect information secretly as it is to destroy information, which used to be viruses would go around and attack your system resources. In addition, client end users whose systems have been taken over used to be they would just be used as zombies in order to launch a denial of service attack. Now those same systems are essentially parts of a dark cloud, which attackers may use to provide spare processing power or storage for their own services, tools, attacks, which are then again resold on the secondary market. So that's the part that I think is actually interesting, the economic component to the attack space and the sort of renewed interest in attacking end users and clients as opposed to big, sexy, centralized systems with a big corporate name on them. And the key there seems to be that the ROI of investment on attacking an end user is better. It's lower risk, higher likelihood of return. There's low variation, which makes it easy to automate and scale attacks. And there's basically no perimeter defense. It is to the point where attackers may take out advertising in order to improve the click-through rates of their drive-by downloads and target end users of a certain clientele. And why shouldn't they advertise? They're using your credit cards to do it. Which leads me to my sort of interest in this. My name's Allison Miller. I work for PayPal in their global risk management group. So we are actually responsible for preventing fraud and abuse on the system, while our information security friends are responsible for protecting the system's networks and infrastructure. I'm responsible for the money. That means I live in the business layer, that wacky business layer in the OAuth framework. All my work is up there. So let's talk about risk. Risk management used to be sort of a fortress mentality in the sense that you developed a perimeter and you hardened it to keep attackers from being on your system. And it seemed like a lot of the emphasis of attacks was simply owning a system, going in and getting control of the system. And therefore, risk exposure could be calculated. Sorry, this is a bit of a hacked formula, but you may recognize it if you studied for your CASSP. Risk exposure is basically the probability some negative event will happen times the value of whatever asset it is that could be exposed. Question? Oh, you were just saying, oh yeah, that's what that is? Yeah, that's what I meant. So now we find ourselves in an environment where we have more of an ecosystem. Now, I don't know if all of you actually manage or work on systems where you have to manage the defenses of a system that provides services directly to consumers, for example, or where you have partners integrated into your system at any given level. But what we find ourselves dealing with is a risk exposure that is the sum of all of the vulnerable or available eligible attack spaces connected to your system. And we also have a new breed of attackers that are focused on monetization. So as someone who works on a platform and observing other large platforms in our ecosystem, we see attackers that instead of trying to attack the mothership, they attack other users. And so, and what does that mean? So if you look at the sort of traditional confidentiality, availability, and integrity pie chart that we use to describe threats generally, we still have threats in all of those categories. Privacy, I suppose, would be more in the confidentiality space. A lot of identity theft or authentication credentials being stolen, malware, system takeovers, and phishing often used to further those types of attack. And then finally, social engineering and financial fraud. But sort of this is interesting to me because I'm kind of an economics geek, is the idea that this really has created a cottage industry and secondary market for folks who can provide these services at scale and, for example, provide botnets for hire, consultants who are crafting customized malware in order to enable additional crime. So why are end users targeted? Because it's really easy to target an end user. An end user, in most cases, is not an information security professional or have a staff of professionals securing their system. And they have their hands tied behind their back and they're blindfolded in a lot of cases. One of the sort of classic social engineering attacks that is big right now is the 419 scam, where everyone familiar with that? Someone poses as your friend and then says, help, help, I'm in London and I lost my wallet and the only thing that will save me is a transfer from you via Western Union. But it can be difficult if you've only established a relationship with someone online to figure out if they are actually your friend or not. And although that is sort of a personalized and hokey example, that is true when you are a consumer of services from an unknown service provider in any type of relationship, social or professional. Now, another thing that end users have to deal with is they can't read the packet headers. They don't always know where a message is from, which is why we have phishing. So phishing is, the version that we see on the killer app email, but every single communications channel and platform has a similar issue in that you can receive messages from other users. You can't necessarily really trace back to understand the origin of that message. So that's why, what is it? SMS smishing? Vishing? Well, I don't know if Twitter has one of those, but the other thing that we see is surfers don't always know where they're going. They can't always see if they have entered a zone that they would normally consider unsafe. If they don't necessarily know how to read the headers and such. So they are prone to click on things and end up not where they thought they were. And ultimately, the problem is that software is not transparent. So customers can't always see what's happening in software that they have executed on their system. This is the why should service providers care slide, in that if you're a system provider, you provide services to an end user. It's buyer beware. They can use them or not. Why should you care that an end user connected to your system is prone to be a victim? Or rather, in more economic terms, why should you invest in protecting your end users? And the first answer is the defensive posture, which is that by providing services to end users and integrating partners into your system, you're basically extending your perimeter. And the truth is that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. A network is only as strong as its weakest endpoint. And so depending on what kind of permissions and access you have granted those users, their security becomes your security. Second issue, this is sort of relevant to me, is that there can be liability implied by your relationship with your customers. For example, I'm at PayPal. We're a financial service provider. We provide financial services. If an end user who is a consumer has an unauthorized transaction in their name, who is liable? It's me. We're liable. We're liable for fraud that happens on that customer's account. And so I have a direct stake in knowing that my customers have accounts that are secure and that they are the ones who are doing the transactions. And then there's also an indirect liability in that you're always downstream of someone. So this is the sort of large-scale credit card compromise situation, right? You can have folks monetizing stolen cards on your system who are not necessarily the person whose card was stolen never necessarily did business with you. They all did business with some gas station outside of Boston, let's say. But because those systems were insecure and those customers' credentials were stolen, that loss can be yours. So as a financial service provider, I'm very sort of economically interested in both the direct and indirect liability of security breaches on end users. So, and the last reason, and this is really the most important, is that as an organization that offers services online, our customers are our lifeblood. And so we want them to feel secure so that they can participate in online services. So I promised a case study. I can't actually talk about a specific case, but let's sort of break it down how this works. Because my thesis is that attackers are moving towards attacks that can be monetized. Here's an attack that can be monetized. So you have your happy-go-lucky victim who has any old email account, and they receive a very strange email that says, hey, I've got pictures, I saw so-and-so put pictures of you online, and there's an obfuscated link. Maybe it's using Bitly, or maybe it's just some sort of random string of characters, and they click on it. And they end up downloading malware, which is waiting around for the next time they log into their online banking, credit card, or PayPal account. So that's the technical exploit, right? That's the easy vulnerability. You know, it would be nice if they had anti-malware running on their system, but in any case, they've been exposed. And then the next thing that happens is credentials get stolen. The software pulls the credentials, they get sent back, they do a call home, they get sent back to the mothership, and then the attacker is able to take over their accounts. Now, it would be, you know, one thing if that meant that only one credential had been stolen, but oftentimes access to one major account, there's a ripple effect, right? I get access to your email account, I recover your passwords from every other account that I see that you've received email from or a bill from. Okay, now I have all of your credentials, and I can impersonate you very, very effectively on any site. So that's where the fraud happens. And then, okay, so I have access to all of your online banking, your financial information, your email, whatever. I can buy anywhere where you can buy. So then I need to get money out of the system, right, to make it worth it. Otherwise, it's just playing around. And so the way that you get money out of the system is that you buy things or you exchange things with someone who will give you cash and then extract money out of the system. And this is basically, although the details change, sometimes it's phishing, not malware. Sometimes it's brute force or social engineering. But in any case, you have these sort of three things. There can be sort of a technical exploit that takes advantage of a vulnerability. Something is stolen. Someone is impersonated. And then funds are taken out of the system. Any question about any of this? I know not all of you are in financial services, but if you have any questions about how the liability works. Okay. My last box on the bottom is cut off. Yeah. It says goods, funds, extraction. Is there any way to? No, that looks like a projector thing, not an angle thing. Okay. What are the goods usually? Yeah, that's a great question. So what are the goods usually? So in traditional fraud, usually if it's like an in-person fraud, if I've duplicated your credit cards, I'm using them in a store, I would buy consumer electronics, DVDs, things that are super easy to resell. Online, my personal propensity and some of the trends that I've seen, digital goods. But digital goods that can be really easily monetized. So digital goods with DRM on them, not so useful. Digital goods that can be resold on exchanges that are set up to sell digital goods, that's how that works. So I believe you're referring to my parent company, eBay, and there are actually some control. There are some limitations on the types of things that can be sold digital goods-wise, and also prepaid cards. Prepaid cards, gift certificates, like cash, as close to cash as you can get. That's what type of goods are usually purchased. It's not people purchasing, you know, oh, they saw that cute sweater at Banana Republic, and then they get that shipped to their next door neighbor. No, it's things that can be really easily monetized. Yeah, thank you for that. That was cute. Okay. What? Another question? No? Okay. All right, so in general, what is our strategy for then, if we have a vested interest in protecting customers and it's the right thing to do, which it is, what's our strategy for doing that? Because client security, notoriously difficult, right? Oh, I'll go out and secure all the nodes on the internet? Right, okay. That sounds like a fun summer vacation. So our strategy for protecting consumers is, your basic prevent, detect, recovery kind of a model, in the sense that, here, let me talk about one thing first. In payments, I have a distinct advantage over others who are trying to prevent abuse on their system, which is that I have an awesome feedback loop. The feedback loop is anytime fraud happens, I'm going to know about it because I'm going to lose that money. So and I have a really strong interest in preventing fraud, because the way that it works is you make a $100 transaction and you pay for it with your credit cards or PayPal or whoever, and that payment provider gets a cut. And let's say it's a really big cut, 200 basis points or 2%. So I just cleared a payment for you of $100, I made $2. Woo, that sounds great, right? But then if that transaction goes bad, what do I give back to the customer? The $2 that I made? No, I give them back the whole $100. I make them whole. So for the $2 that I made, I have a $100 risk. So I want to be really sure. But it's nice that I get all of that feedback loop, because let's say I was a young startup and I just went out there with no fraud controls on, true story, then I would get a lot of data back about what fraudsters do, right? Because they would all come and they would go, cool, free money, and they would take advantage of that system. And then I would have all kinds of data on which I can model and find different types of patterns using whatever methodology of choice. If you're a machine learning geek, cool. If you like statistics, let's do some logistical regression. If you're more of a, I want to know exactly what that fraudster did, you can figure out the heuristics and patterns to actually see exactly what aspects of the behavior you want to do. So that all of that data is gold for us, because then we can actually do a really data-based risk management program. So the activity happens and we analyze it. And then through that, we understand what to expect from different types of customers when they come to us and they transact, what is actually normal for them, what their baseline is. And it's customized to them. That's the first part. And we can put in controls then related to velocity, related to authenticating identity, that prevent a lot of the incoming pressure of fraud. Then what we do is we take all of the data-based models and we actually evaluate every single transaction that goes through the system. And then through that, we detect any unusual anomalies based on their actual transacting behavior on our site. And then we take that information, we try and discern where the incoming pressure is coming from, and we can then take outbound measures to try and get ahead of the problem. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Furthermore, our customers are 100% protected from unauthorized activity on their account. If someone steals your credit card and uses it on PayPal, or someone takes over your PayPal account and conducts unauthorized activity, you are 100% protected globally. And if you are a seller, because sellers become victims of fraud too in this model, if you are a seller, we have protection programs in order for you to reduce your risk. And so we offer those protection programs. And then through all of that, after all of these layers of controls have been in place, we get additional activity, right? Because we still have fraud coming through. Because at the end of the day, every single transaction we bear some risk on, but we want transactions to go through because that's how we make money. So that's our basic prevent, detect, recover model. Big emphasis on the data and the analysis. However, what I really want to talk about are the things that we do to get ahead of the monetization attack. So a little bit about prevention. This is actually where my group has the most crossover with our information security group, because a lot of the controls that we put in place, like authentication technologies, they're very similar to what an information security group would do for managing risk associated with both users and customers. So we are interested in protecting customers, and we work on a lot of these programs with them. And our philosophy in general is the best way to prevent fraud or other bad experiences on our site is to not let bad actors on the system. But that's very difficult. That means that we really need to know who you are coming through the door and how many of you have signed up for a PayPal account. Okay, you don't have to admit it if you don't want to, but a lot of people have signed up for PayPal accounts, and you know that it's a low friction experience. You don't have to provide, everything all the way down to your mother's maiden name. So we have to get very good in discerning who we think people are and what their intent is as soon as they walk in the door. Because if I offer you an account, what's the riskiest thing I do for you? Your first transaction, right? After you've been on the system, I know you for a while, or after you've been on the system, I get to know you. But it's that first transaction, when I don't really know you yet, where I have to sort of extend a little trust, a little love, and then learn about what your intent is. So this is basics of access control as well, is that you know who your end users are, and then you assign them privileges that are appropriate based on how you expect them to use the site, role-based access control. We have a sense of that in the sense that we have different types of customers. We don't have a homogeneous user population anymore. PayPal used to always just be person-to-person payments, where I would be sending you money to your email account to buy that cool thing from you on eBay. But now we process payments from everything from personal payments all the way up to we're processing for Dell and for airlines. So the idea is you give people access at a level of privileges that is appropriate given how well you know them and what your expected behavior of them is while they're on the site. And then you monitor, and continue to refine. So then we get to the cool part of the presentation, or the cool part of my work, which is actually the anomaly and pattern detection. You'll notice there's not much data on this slide, and I apologize, but we don't share a lot of data about how we do our pattern detection. But this is the interesting part, because it is actually a lot of work to evaluate in an automated way every transaction that happens on the system and take into account the type of users involved and the context of the transaction across multiple channels, across multiple geographies, and let all of that through. So let me give you an example of some of the patterns that we're looking at. One of the easiest patterns, or not easiest, one of the most distinct patterns is an account takeover. So I create an account. I'm based in New York City. I continue to transact from that account. Maybe I log in every once in a while from LA or Chicago. I'm a woman of the world, London. But suddenly something really new happens on that account. I'm no longer I'm logging in from a new machine. I add a new address, maybe I add a new financial instrument, and I want to transact with someone brand new. So in those cases, we would sort of put a guard up, and we have to evaluate all the other variables associated with the transaction and try and understand, is this good behavior? Is this just someone's doing something new? Maybe she moved, maybe she bought a new system, or is this an account takeover? And if it's an account takeover, take action. Another classic fraud pattern is what is known in the trade as a merchant bust out. So any of you work in financial services? Okay, no, maybe. So basically how this works is you have let's say it's a small business. They're doing $20,000 a month in transactions with you for, I don't know, let's say they're 6 months, what have you, and their activity pattern is stable. And then one night, they put through $500,000 in transactions. The money all clears, and then they're gone. What just happened? Well, it was organized. They set up a pattern, or maybe there was, or maybe something happened where the owner of the business actually sold the business to someone who was not actually planning on continuing to run the corner store. They were planning on conducting this bust out, because this is a really great way to exit money. What greater way to exit money than be the recipient of stolen funds? And so this is sort of a classic pattern that you would see. Stability. We've gotten to know you. We understand what your pattern is. But then a very quick spike in activity and then disappear. So these are the types of things that we are monitoring for. And we have lots of different tools at our disposal to do this, because it turns out that a website is a big database. So we have all this history of activity on the site as far as transactions. We have all this data that we can mine using various techniques. So our favorite is statistics, but we also have a lot of sort of rule-based approaches and machine learning, neural nets. And at the end of the day, we have a lot of humans who are looking for patterns. So, yes?
Wouldn't it be very similar to the credit card?
Of course.
Is it the same, or you have I know we can't talk about it.
Let's see. We're in payment processing, and so we take advantage of all of the existing understanding of how to manage credit card fraud, right? Because we're processing credit cards, prepaid cards, debit cards, bank account payments, all kinds of different ways that money gets from A to B. So we are absolutely taking advantage of the same technologies that are available to folks who are issuers who manage credit card risk with the credit card that you have on your wallet. However, it's we are our special sauce, or our happy place, I don't know, is that we are a website. And so the technology associated with running and securing a website, we also have available to us. We also have that expertise.
Would that include following the person as they go from category to category?
Following the person as they go from category to category.
For example, with eBay, your parents, you watch what categories they bounce around on, and you know, this person is, is looking at the things you usually are, and now they're going to buy something.
eBay, like our other partners, like large merchants, has their own data and way of characterizing transactions. And when that's available to us, we will take advantage of it. It's useful for us, I would say, especially in the case of the sellers. So if you're an acquirer, you process transactions for a seller. If you're a good acquirer, you go to that business and you ask them what they sell, because that will give you a sense of how much money they're going to be pushing through your system and what the average transaction size is going to look like, so that you understand what to expect from them. And Moxie asked, what do people buy when they're using stolen credit cards? They buy consumer electronics. So if you're an acquirer, it's very interesting to you to know that this dude sells books versus that dude sells consumer electronics. Why? Because the risk profile just changes based on the content. So I'm not sure that I have enough computers in the world to process all of the SKU data and like understand all of the SKU data is like an item level indicator. I don't know if that level of detail is really interesting, but it is always interesting to know if you're working with sellers, what is it that they're selling? Yeah.
What's the balance between managing the false positives, in a reasonable way? I gotta imagine that I've dealt with at least one experience where it was painful and that I was, they maybe verify offensive information. I read about horror stories, people like get their money locked up for 6 months. And how do you deal with that, where when the rate of false positives can be extraordinarily high versus the risk of putting off all your legitimate users that are just trying to do business and conduct their
Right. So there's always that tension in any business like mine, where you're working on a margin and you have that high risk, to find that balance. So it is basically we come to agreements with the folks who generate the revenue. The business I bring is the loss that I can reduce. The business that a revenue generating business, they want authorizations like all the way up, right? And I want losses all the way down. So you have to find that balance, and it is very difficult. So I'm going to do two things. One is explain that we report our losses to the street, so I'm not breaking any confidentiality clauses to let you know that losses are at pretty much historic lows for our system. And that's between 25 and 30 basis points, roughly. So that should be in our annual report. At the same time, though, we've been getting authorization levels up, which is really good. So I'm really proud of that. Now, another element of this that I want to talk about is the fact that, so every transaction is scored, and we make a determination. Every time that we score something or want to make a decision, then there's an action that we take. So one of the actions that we can take is to decline a transaction or to restrict a user and make them confirm something additionally to us before they will continue. We also have limits. We have situations where transactions get held. We have certain businesses that have reserves with us. This is sort of the business of the payments business. Now, one of the things that we rely on here is humans. So humans are very expensive. And so what we do have, though, is we have some portion of transactions or events that we will stop. Right there, the decision is no. And then we will have the vast majority is go, do more. We like that, more transactions. Then there's this gray portion in the middle, gray, that we outsort. And we have a human look at it and say, what's going on? Maybe we should just call this user. And the decisions they can make are, they can say, stop that user, that's bad. Let that user go, that was fine. Or they can take some additional action where they actually get on the phone and call the person. It's very expensive. So our preference, of course, is to drive, is sort of to drive things to make it much easier to decide good or bad, so that it's really only the really complicated, narrow, gray middle that we outsort and try and use those humans to manage that type of pattern detection.
From the user's point of view, it's practically impossible to get the human on the phone. So is there any more time to make it easier for users to remediate from their end, having to wait for you guys to make the phone?
Yes, and that's actually some of the technology some of the same technology that we use here. We are trying to automate those ways that a user can confirm to us that this is their address, or confirm to us that this is indeed them on the phone, and the challenge of those technologies is that a lot of those, think about this, right? A lot of the questions that I could ask you to prove you are who you say you are, what are they? They're credentials for every other website that you're on. So we're working through that. But the fact that modern financial institutions still have to, sometimes this is there's little regulatory implications here too, but have to rely on faxes is really difficult for someone who has been working with modern technology for a little while to accept. But yes, we are definitely investing in automating those exact types of remediation efforts. And that gets to my caveat, which is that one of the things that is great about pattern detection is that it alerts you early to something strange going on. But there's a lot of completely normal, innocent, harmless things that look unusual. So for example, the merchant bust-out case. Well, okay, maybe you're a software developer and all along you've just kind of been, moseying along, selling your software and, shareware, and people were throwing you a buck here or there. And then you put your application on an app store. You built a version that was specific for the iPad, and overnight, everyone in Chicago decided they were going to download it. So that could be normal, but we would want to review that. And so speed, when your attacker is someone who's trying to monetize and you move money instantly, speed is a double-edged sword. Our customers want speed. You don't want to be stopped at the register and call your issuer and say, yes, it's really me buying that laptop, but almost every time you do it, at Circuit City, Best Buy, Office Depot, or anywhere else, you're going to have to make that phone call because they want that time to make that evaluation. So just like we have that sort of trade-off in whether we're going to say yes or no, and understand that every time we say no, that transaction can't go through, there's going to be a negative reaction. We also have this, we want to do everything instantly, but sometimes we just need some time to figure out what's going on. Okay, so at PayPal, we are also, on the one hand, we are constrained in that we have a set of activities that we can both detect and take action on our own platform, but we are downstream of everyone else. So what are some of the things that we are doing that are outbound? I don't have control over anyone's inbox, but I have a vested interest in you not getting phishing emails that say they're coming from PayPal.com. So we have some outbound efforts. The first one is actually related to preventing phishing, which is that we now sign all of our emails. So have any of you gotten a phishing email from PayPal.com? I know you have. If you have an email address, you have gotten a phishing email. Okay, so sorry for asking for audience participation and asking redundant questions, but if you are using one of the major ISPs, because I think we've hit 6 of the top 10 or so, you should not be getting very many phishing emails from PayPal or eBay. I'm sorry, I don't know if eBay is doing this, but PayPal is, which is that we have set up agreements with the largest email providers that anything that looks like it's coming from PayPal.com will not be delivered unless it bears our signature, which is great and has really cut down on a lot of the incoming phishing. Yeah, question.
How do I know that?
How do you know that?
I mean, email account, something comes from PayPal. How do I know?
As an end user?
Yeah.
As an end user, you don't know that.
So if I have a privacy account that gets like a ton from PayPal, they should not get a business one email account. What was the thing?
You're saying that phishing emails look just like ours, so you still don't know which ones are legitimate? So do you, when you get emails that look like they come from PayPal.com, whether you think they're a phish or not, what do you click on the links in them?
No, I'm just saying, obviously, I think I'm from PayPal.
This,
examine the body, and
yes, you would examine the body and the headers. So consider this sort of a branding effort, and that this is, just consider this, we're protecting our brand. We don't want someone else to send an email that says PayPal.com on it. As an end user, you don't know. You don't know that the incoming has disappeared. You just have less emails that come in that you might inadvertently click on. So that's helpful for me. It reduces the attack space slightly because it means that some portion of users, the portion of users who their primary email account is one of the major providers, they're going to be getting far less and hopefully like none of the phishing emails that in yesteryears was a huge problem for us. We had a lot of folks get their accounts taken over simply by merit of phishing. Now the threats, of course, you move here, the threat changes over here, but that has been helpful for us, yes.
So, if I understand the scenario correctly, if there's fraud on my PayPal account, PayPal bears the fraud on it.
Yes.
And as the bearer of the risk, we've taken measures to reduce the occurrence of risk by partnering with the major ISP.
Right.
I don't see why I ever need to worry about whether it's phishing attack.
Very true.
Right? So I guess I don't see.
So you wouldn't need to worry about the phishing attack if all that bothered you was the economic side of it. But having your account taken over or your financial instrument taken over, it's not a good experience. And I don't consider simple account takeover or someone stealing your credit card number. I don't consider that identity theft. Identity theft is when you have a major excavation and cleanup to do because someone has applied for credit or a mortgage or something in your name and they know everything about you and they can basically impersonate you over the phone, as well as you can represent yourself. So yes, on the scale of these things, some of these threats are lower and the remediation is easier, but it's never a good experience. And so we are pleased that this is one less, a bad experience that we can get ahead of. At the same time, we are reducing our own financial exposure because that exposure is ours, indeed. Question?
I just wanted to make a comment that I got an email from PayPal today that
try.
You guys actually do investigate on records which are problematic, like proposed technical skills, or whose mailboxes are protected by somebody fighting scams and technical skills, that those the little things end user does to huge difference. And still figure out why it is, but it was real. I looked at the header right there with an SPS and an SPS. It was cool.
Okay. But it wasn't. Was it a friendly note?
It was the card that dropped off of my PayPal account.
Oh, okay. It had expired.
There have been no changes on the cards that ever used PayPal, but don't make any sense, but I have to forget.
Okay.
Somebody could be months behind on this tax, years behind. That's a whole other issue, but,
All right.
unlike some of my banks, I don't get messages from PayPal with links in the look at identical.
Yes, that is another thing that is challenging. Is that it makes sense that we would try to reduce links and emails. Of course, we're online and we communicate with our customers via email, so that's challenging. Another question?
While we're just talking,
Yeah, sure.
there ain't too much. I mean, I noticed that my banks are pretty much calling me most of the time. They rarely get an email of any type.
They call you?
Seems like they've given up on maybe email. While PayPal insists on pure email communication only.
Well, I would say that just like we would prefer to automate things like ID checks, we automate a lot of our communication, but trust me when I tell you, we have full call centers with people calling in and on the phone trying to resolve issues, and we also make outbound calls as well. So our communication with our customers is not email only. It could be that the emails that you have received didn't have a phone number on it because it wasn't a problem where we needed you to call in, but we do talk to people on the phone.
Historically, the reputation of the company is that, no phone, will never be under the phone. So a lot of people who use banks have used, eBay and stuff, using it, and don't know that they
Haven't used it lately. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're not email only, but marketing we're pretty much. I mean, it is a preferred communication mechanism, and if you haven't used PayPal lately, you might not have an up-to-date phone call on your account, a phone number on your account, so that would make it difficult for us to call you. Yeah. Question in the back.
I have a question here. If you if your top program,
Mm-hmm.
that's people who spend more have lower fraud rates than we answer.
I think I prefer to take that offline. I think I can answer it, but I don't think it. Yeah. So yes. All right. So besides signing our emails, phishing and sites that host malware, we are still alerted to on a pretty regular basis. We have folks who email us in reports that they have received a phishing email or what have you. And we also participate in some programs where folks have outbound efforts basically just to find and harvest these things. And we actually have a takedown. We engage in takedowns of phishing sites in order to, again, reduce the attack space, reduce the chance that one of our users might inadvertently give up their credentials because they thought the phish site was PayPal. And we used to outsource a lot of this, but actually we found that having an in-house team works best for us. And we have improved to the point where our average takedown is within hours of it being within us being alerted to it, which is great. In addition, we have outbound education efforts trying to both give our users an understanding that they are protected from on-off when they pay for PayPal, and that shopping without sharing which is one of our core value props, is a great way to go. We provide a two-factor authentication product, security key, which is available as, you know, one of the little like tokens you put on your keychain. We also have like a credit card form factor, and we can SMS you a one-time password to your phone. So there's a couple different form factors. That is available internationally as well. We don't have full coverage of the globe, but we're working on that, and that's useful. However, while we think it's important to provide customers with information and tools, who's liable for the fraud? We're still liable for the fraud. So that's why this is one piece of our effort as opposed to the whole thing. So in conclusion, today's attack space is really driven by economic actors, and that innovation in this space seems to be around attacks that can be monetized. And as a platform where money moves, I have a vested interest in getting ahead of those attacks, whether that be by amping up controls on my site or seeing that within the ecosystem elsewhere, we've taken proactive steps to get ahead of some of those attacks on our customers. And my users are at least as likely to be attacked as I am. Living in the business logic layer means that even though the site is working as it is supposed to be working, I am still vulnerable to a risk exposure associated with compromised users. You look like do you have a question? Yeah, he just turned his head to the side. He looked like he had a question about that. Okay. Okay. All right. So, and the model that we've employed that we have found is working for us is that the first step is understanding who our customers are and giving them a level of access that's appropriate, given how they intend to use the system. Constant monitoring to determine any anomalies, and then also working off platform in order to reduce the overall attack space. And so now I will take questions. Am I short? Am I long? How am I doing on time? I'm perfect. You can say that every day. What's up?
What percentage of your phishing access is comfortable with you, and how do you guys deal with that? How do you think you take down the website that was your posted overseas? What do you guys do about that? And what kind of cooperation?
Okay, so the question was about phishing attacks, phishing sites, attacks that aren't based in the US. Well, you're quite right in that just like the internet, e-crime is global. So we do have contacts in law enforcement and partnerships with companies in this space and with ISP, you know, the rest of the internet internationally. So it can be difficult because laws are different in different countries. And so if you read in the news about the amount of effort that it takes law enforcement to take down a rogue ISP, that benefits us just like it benefits everyone else on the internet. And so understanding that, though, understanding the source of an attack is useful for us when the attack comes to our platform, right? But it harms us just like it harms everyone else when our customers are attacked off our platform and we can't see it.
There's a pretty big number that covers the fraud that is right back.
Right. It's PayPal's loss. What we report on in the street is what our loss is, as opposed to loss that's associated with other players in the financial environment.
Is there any numbers on subterranean fraud?
A big pardon? Subterranean fraud?
Subterranean, so like in the insurance world, when you pass fraud off to the company. So is there numbers on like the fraud that
Well, I'm not actually sure, and I don't know who follows this. I don't know that issuers really report their losses in the same way. And our numbers are kind of interesting to me personally. This is just sort of a side thing. Is that I think our numbers are interesting because we're a platform in this space, in the sense that we are. In some ways, we're both the issuer and the acquirer, and the way that we are locked into the payment system is that we are both a merchant and a processor in the way that the liability works. So when looking at our loss numbers, I just am I'm proud of what it represents, but certainly there is more fraud in the payment system than what we bear. Well, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to move them, especially when our payment volume is increasing at such a pace. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about changes that deal with that open up to PayPal API? I know you guys go through like the authorization part of it, but then you've got a large number of companies that are authorized to have payments or things like that. But how does that?
Sure. So what he's asking about is PayPal has actually opened up quite a few APIs. So I don't know, would that be considered payment in the cloud or something? Okay. Yes. So the APIs are interesting in the sense that there's still the same special sauce, in the sense that we see every transaction coming in, and we have information to evaluate about the participants in the transaction. It adds a layer of complexity that in these transactions we now have, say, a buyer, a seller, and an app provider. But I think that it's within our means to discern what's going on, and so whether or not it's fraud so far has been something we've been able to manage. It's basically akin to when you enter a new channel. And so we have some experience entering new channels because we've enabled some product features that allow merchants to accept payments exclusively over the phone as opposed to web-based. We also have a mobile product that launched several years ago and has gone through a few iterations, because the first iteration was SMS-based. By the way, that still works. You can still send money just using SMS, which is pretty cool. And there's a callback loop to make sure that it's authenticated and all. But having worked with new technology just in general, it's sort of a natural extension.
Where it's really the buyer and seller is not really complaint, but it's obviously illegal.
Right. So the question was about what do we do about people who sell fake Louis Vuitton bags and such, and they're merchants. And the answer is that's against our acceptable use policies and illegal. So, well, we would get sued. Yeah, close enough to illegal that we don't allow it. So when we find it, we shut it down.
So it's like, let's say eBay would get the notice from it, then that would pass that stuff to you.
Right. Or we might find out. So in some cases in counterfeit, I know I'm buying a fake Louis Vuitton bag and I'm okay with that, in which case I'm not going to complain. But some people are a little surprised when they get the pleather. Right? So they put in a claim that says this is not what I thought it was, and that's how we get alerted. So I think I'm at time. So if any of you have any other questions, come on up. I'm taking the mic off. Thank you.